Hey everybody, welcome back. This is going to be our breakdown of the Potomac River, stop number 5, the Major League Fishing Pro Circuit. Another solid event for me, a 30th place finish. I hate that I lost a little ground on day 3. I slid from 21st going into day 3 to 30th with a 12 pound and so ounce bag, but all in all, a great week, good points. I moved up into the top 10 for AOI race, so that's something to be proud of. Got one more event at St. Lawrence River. That'll be a new and an exciting experience for me. I can't wait to get after that. But Potomac River, I'd never been to a tidal fishery. I didn't really know what to expect other than research that, fish will fluctuate with the high and low tides, that it's really not textbook, like look at a chart and it does exactly what the chart says, because you have wind, flow, influx, or surge. Sometimes the other weather factors just affect the tide a little bit. But what I found out after being there on day 1 is that fish related to offshore grass. Been there, done that, so I kind of got a little bit of confidence in my decision making after I saw that. Day 2 of practice, I dialed into a bait that would catch bigger fish that I'm about to go over with you, and then from there it was during the tournament really figuring out what times fish were in certain places, and there would be bite windows that I started to pick up on, and pretty well got to where I could pattern when those better fish were going to move into an area and feed. So starting out, the better fish that I caught, my first day of practice was chatterbait. That's the best way to cover water and grass and know that you got something a fish will bite. Caught a bunch of fish, but I didn't have the weight I needed. Day 2, I made a little adjustment to a swim jig and immediately noticed my size go up. I think it was just something a little more subtle. There was a lot of boats on the lake, a lot of chatterbaits getting thrown, and most of the top 10 caught them on chatterbait, so I'm not saying that I had something special, but for me, that swim jig, going through the same areas, I was catching better quality fish. More of those 2.5 pounders is really what you needed, up to 3 pounds. But that swim jig I was throwing, this particular setup in my mind, 100% made a difference, because I could go around other boats, other fishermen that are better than me, and I could get behind them and catch fish on this. And I think it was a combination of the color of the swim jig and the rod setup. So let's talk about that. This is a Black Bass Tackle Industries custom swim jig. It's a 3/8 ounce. That was important. And this color is Green Pumpkin Crush. It's got about 5 or 8 strands of orange. I put that on the belly, and a swimming trailer is what I dialed into. The flapping trailer, I didn't get nearly as many bites with it. Now, here was the key. You could throw this thing out, hold your rod tip down and reel it, kind of like sometimes we do a chatterbait, and you wouldn't get nearly as many bites, or you'd have some slap it. What I was doing, I've thrown it on a 7.3 hammer, medium heavy, a heavy action, I'm sorry, and a high speed 8.2 reel, but 18 pound fluorocarbon. That's fairly heavy line for fickle fish. What that did is it allowed me to lose direct contact with the bait. And you're saying, what in the world does that mean? I'd make a long cast with this light jig, long rod, get that jig on out there, and I would hold my rod tip up. I'll show you some footage here. Hold my rod tip up and have a really slow, steady retrieve. And what I was doing, I would have a bow in my line. Between my rod tip and my bait, there was not a straight line. There was a bow in my line, and what that does, in my opinion, sometimes I've done it with smallmouth and current. I've done it in a lot of different situations. It's almost like a trout fishing technique, kind of. It makes your bait almost lose direct contact with what you're doing at the reel and the rod, and it makes it more natural. It's almost like it floats through the water column rather than being pulled through the water column. That was a huge deal. It would get down in that grass and I would see a little bit of the bow of my line come out, just a slow, steady retrieve. When it would get down in the grass, I'd keep the same cadence, and all of a sudden that jig would softly pop free. A bunch of violent, whipping and raking it out of the grass didn't seem to be the ticket for me. And when it would slowly pop free, I would see that, I would feel most of the bites, but sometimes I would just see that bow in my line just steadily disappearing, my line tightening up, straightening out. And once I got down to where I could feel and felt some resistance, some weight that felt more than a strand of grass, then I just lean into them. That's the way I caught most of my better fish with that swim jig. That little technique just seemed to get me more bites and better bites, and go around, you know, fish that had just seen baits and catch them. So that was a big deal. And what I ended up finding out is why they wanted that color. They were eating these gigantic tidal crawfish, and no joke, a lot of those crawfish were green pumpkin. I'm talking about a identical match to this jig. Green pumpkin on the top, on the bottom of their claws, and on the bottom of their tail they would have orange. So go figure, that's why they were picking this jig out of the crowd and chewing on it. The next bait that I caught a lot of fish on days 1 and 2, very simple. You've seen this before, it's no surprise. I went down to a lighter silver tungsten weight. I don't know if the silver mattered or not, but I like that in the summertime. It gives a little bit of flash, especially in grass. But the Clone Ringo, simple little finesse worm. I threw it on 12-pound line on a hammer with a bait casting reel, a hammer 7-foot medium heavy. This rod has a very good parabolic action. I set the hook too hard. With this rod and 12-pound line, I'm protecting myself to keep from breaking off on the hook set. But it's still got plenty of backbone to pull those fish out of the grass. So that little dude, just dragging it through the grass where I knew there were fish and felt like they were just not in a feeding mood, that little guy would catch them. You might see in the Potomac video, I caught some fish on day 1 on my clone. I had a bag full of crawl cane. I've talked about crawl cane fish attractant before. It's to me, it makes a difference. All you do is shake it in the bag. It's crushed up crawfish. Go figure. It can't hurt. Well, on day 2, you'll see me with a bottle of some aerosol crawfish spray out on the deck, because I had one bag of Clone Ringos with the crawl cane in them. Left everything. I left my crawl cane at home. I didn't have it, so I actually ran out of that bag, and I noticed. I tried fishing it without the scent on it. I noticed a difference, so I ended up having to use the spray to put on my Clone Ringo for day 2. But that little guy catches fish everywhere, including the Potomac. That was a big key for me. It really helped me on, I guess it was maybe day 2. Yeah, day 2 to cull up, catch a couple of key fish. It got me up close to 15 pounds. Day 3. My area had a lot of pressure. On day 2, I had somebody that was, in my opinion, crossing the line on coming in on me. They repeatedly stayed around me. I actually had to lean on my fish. I had to sit there a long time because I knew as soon as I left they'd be on it, and I was waiting for the tide to get right. So anyway, my boat was on top of the fish all day on day 2. Day 3, I go back, and what I had dialed in on this particular place, it was a long stretch of grass, but you had an average depth of, say, 4 feet, 30, 40, 50 yards out from the bank, and then there was a little swag. You're parallel on the bank. It would drop down to about 6 foot, depending on what the tide level was, and then it would come up. Well, when it came up, there was a patch of beautiful milfoil that was about twice the size of my boat, and it almost made a little point, or it was just a little depth change, and that was really the juice, what I called on that spot. So on day 3, I go back. It's like 9:30. I haven't had a bite. Clone Ringo, the swim jig, man, I had all the confidence in the world. We had, you know, the right kind of weather that I could just put that swim jig in my hand and go to work. Hadn't had a bite. So wheels are turning. A jerkbait, I'd caught 1 fish on it in practice, but if you know me, you know I like to throw a jerkbait in grass. So it's just something I think will catch fish when other things won't. So the little voice in my head kept saying jerkbait, jerkbait. I pull it out of the rod box. Walk to the back. I got my Lowrance Ghost on anchor mode. I walk to the back and make a long cast over that good grass patch, and I catch a crappie on the first cast. Crappie on a jerkbait is a big one too. So second cast, I catch a good bass. It was close to a 3-pounder. It was one of my better fish of the day. So I said, well, maybe I'm onto something. Next cast, I catch another keeper. That right there showed me there was fish there. I'd been there for a while. I'd been throwing my best baits, and they didn't want to bite them. So the jerkbait, I think those fish just a lot of boat pressure. They had felt that. They had seen baits. They had seen all their buddies get snatched out of the grass with swim jigs. So the jerkbait was something that would trigger those fish. I started out throwing one. We had some clouds. Started out throwing one that was kind of a goldish silver, a lot of flash to it, with some chartreuse and orange on the belly, and the fish I was catching barely had it. And what that tells me with a jerkbait, when you see that, you know that sometimes they're just at sole reaction, and it doesn't matter what color you throw, you're going to barely hang some, you're going to lose some. Sometimes you can make an adjustment just like with any other lure and get them to start eating a little better. Your hookup ratio goes up way up, and you'll land more of those fish because they'll get 2 hooks in them instead of 1, you know, barely outside the mouth and the gill, the fin. That's the kind of jerkbait fishing that'll stress you out. So we had clouds. What I went to is I actually pulled it right out of the pack. It was a jerkbait that was matte color. That finish in clouds, it doesn't put off a flash at all, but it's still got that erratic darting action. It's a dull color that really stands out in low light conditions. And when I made that change after I'd caught a couple of fish that were barely hooked, I still had some that were borderline hooked, but they ate it better. They got more hooks in them. I was able to land the fish that were biting. So that made a big difference. That's aside from a fish or two I caught on the swim jig on day 3, that was where most of my weight came from. My jerkbait setup was a 6'9" medium hammer. It's my favorite jerkbait rod. High speed reel, 8 to 5. And what you'll notice that I do on my jerkbaits in the grass is that I'm really working them hard. That's because I'm throwing it on 16-pound fluorocarbon. You're gonna hear about 10, 12-pound line for a jerkbait. It gives it more action. Yes, it does. What that 16 allows me to do is keep that bait up in the water column. I'm not getting bogged down in the grass. What I have to do to combat that heavier line is I have to give it more action. I really have to pop it on slack line to get that side-to-side action to make the fish eat it. So don't be afraid to throw your jerkbait on heavier line, but be prepared to work hard to give that bait the action that you need to get the bites out of it. I really feel like if I had not made that adjustment, if I'd have been stubborn and said, man, I've been here making my money on the swim jig, I'm gonna live or die by it, I don't know that I would have even caught a limit. So adjustments are key. You're very, very, very seldomly gonna fish 3 days of an event, 4 days, even 2 days sometimes, using the same thing, doing the same thing. So key lesson there, be adaptable, listen to what your heart tells you, forget about what happened yesterday, and think about your experience, your knowledge, the God-given intuition, the the instinct that we have been given as anglers. Listen to that, go by it, and fish the moment, as we all know that that likes to be said, and that right there will help you catch more fish during that time. What happened yesterday doesn't matter. So that's the breakdown. The swag in the grass was a big deal. I had other places that were just expansive grass flats. There might be a little difference in what type of grass. There was a lot of star grass and then milfoil, some hydrilla. Grass can be overwhelming, but you want to look for those little subtle differences. When I found that swag, I was actually idling with my side scan on my Lowrance, looking at the grass, and I saw that low spot. Turned the engine off, stood up, started fishing. Could see on my depth chart where it looked like it rose up in front of me, and caught a good fish. That's how I found that place in practice. So just little differences in the grass is what is gonna find you the volumes of fish, the concentrations of fish. You want it near deep water. Don't just get on a gigantic grass flat and spend 5 hours hoping you run into where the fish are. Try to narrow that down into where a creek runs through. It runs near a drop-off. You're seeing different types of grass where they mix. Little differences like that, spending some time on it, you can find those fish in the grass. If you're going to a tidal fishery and you're not familiar with it, the best advice I can give you after spending a whopping 5 days on a tidal fishery is get in a place that looks right, give the fish time to bite. There'll be more than one bite window a day. If you're in the right place, then a place that you really got confidence in, you feel that the fish are there, give them time to bite, and you'll do well. So thank y'all so much for watching. Make sure to leave me a comment if you have any questions. And any of the setups that I've used, any of the rods, the reels, the line size, any of that, or if it's something that you want to try to take that I've talked about today and relate to your own fishery, holler at me. I'll be glad to help you. Thank y'all so much for watching. I appreciate it, and we'll see you around the corner.